Hey guys, I've got some new artwork for you today. I've got some architecture concept sketches for kind of like a medieval fantasy village. Most of these were done on stream for my Patreon members. Since I started my Patreon at the end of January, it's been going really well. It's so much fun to interact with you guys directly, and the Discord has been absolutely amazing. We're exchanging feedback, we're chatting about all sorts of stuff related to art in the industry, and it's just really cool to have a much closer connection to my community there. And I've been doing some live streams, which I think are going to become a really regular thing, since it seems to be a really good way to give feedback, to articulate very specific things that I want to talk about, and also just to hang out and casually work on stuff while you guys can ask me questions, and you know, we can just talk about whatever. So I've left a couple parts from the stream in real time in this video. There were a couple moments that I felt were worth slowing down, and you can hear exactly what I was thinking and why I made certain choices. But other than that, as usual, I'll just go through my thought process and a little bit of the decision making and the function of sketches like this in a bigger process of creating an environment. So please consider going over to my Patreon. I'm already blown away by the amount of support over there, and it's just been really fun. So please go check it out and consider joining. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope you like this. Let's go. I just started out by gathering references. I'm looking for things to be pretty grounded, not looking for crazy epic scale or anything. I like to find like one or two elements in a reference as a starting point for a design. That way things don't get too complicated and I don't get lost looking at every single detail of the reference. You can take like the shape of a chimney or a cluster of windows that are interesting and almost make that the identity of the design of any given structure, at least to start with. I changed the subject of this design at the very last second, right before I streamed. I originally had planned to design something else, which I gathered a bunch of references for ahead of time, but I did a poll and my viewers wanted to see some architecture stuff instead, so I wasn't really prepared with references for this, so I wish I had been more specific and spent a bit more time gathering really high quality references, but I didn't want to bore everyone in the stream by spending the first 45 minutes looking for references. This brush here that I said in the video is it's like my most used brush. This is great. I love using this for sketching architecture, because I like I like doing it's almost like a silhouette, but also with a little bit of value information. So like I can indicate a little bit of lighting and stuff. So this is the kind of way I might start my sketches. So you can see like there's a little bit of information about planes happening, major shapes, and just kind of letting the brush do weird stuff and going with it. So my idea here was pretty vague. Just a small village of about 100 people. The general kind of ambience and atmosphere of the village is quite fearful and kind of in turmoil. that's pretty much what I'm thinking when I'm designing the buildings. This can be how a lot of personal work and world building progresses. Just starting with a vague idea and then exploring some options in a very broad sense based on that vague idea, and then unlocking new avenues to pursue further, and then getting more specific with the designs as your story gets more concrete and, more compelling and having more complexity. So you guys have heard me say a million times that I'm all about light and dark shapes and the composition of those shapes and how they relate to each other. So you can do a lot of work with architecture just based on that. So I love look at just the dark shapes in this reference. That's all I'm thinking about when I'm doing this this little sketch. I just wanted to incorporate these kind of sunken in recesses. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here. Also, I should have mentioned earlier, but finding counter references can be helpful too. Sometimes I find one or two references that represent a direction I might go naturally, but that I ultimately don't want. If you don't specifically stop yourself from pursuing certain directions, you might just end up there naturally. So having a good counter reference, sometimes that can help with veering off track. Basically, a good rule of thumb that I like to follow for the kind of stuff that I do is almost 70% big shapes. So big broad shapes are 70%, make up 70% of what you're seeing, and then medium shapes might be 20%. So this first one is what I would call a big shape. So something that kind of connects the whole image. And then medium shapes would be, stuff like this. This would be 20% of the image. So maybe just two things like this of the image or of the design, I mean. So, and then small is I'm talking granular stuff, little artifacts and a little detail is 10%. So that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking of when I'm thinking about shapes. This thing about big, medium, and small shapes is really just a guideline for you to follow, especially if you find a design isn't working and you can't sort out why. You can go back to that kind of guideline and address it with your current design that's not working. It might help simplify things and get it to a better spot. So this is probably a pretty good example of the big, medium, and small shapes. This major big shape is most of the composition of the design, and I would say that this and this are maybe a medium shape. So it's maybe 60% this big shape, 30% this medium shape, these medium shapes, and then I've got these little small kind of granular things. I'm trying to have a variety of shapes and types of structures. I only want one or two of them or a few of them to inspire the direction I want to go. So there's no real cohesive shape language yet. These are just they're just meant to help find the shape language that I want to go. If I were to make a village and use all of these structures as they are, it would look really disjointed, and from a design standpoint, I don't think it would look that good. But once I find a couple of these I like and then start that iteration process and another round of designs, then I can start making sure that all of the buildings look good together and clumped up in a village. And I'll also think about what those buildings are and make sure that they have a function and are somewhat believable in the village that I'm trying to create. What was really nice about doing this on stream with some of my members on Patreon was just getting to discuss my ideas and my thought process, and also get feedback and have people actually bringing stuff up to me that raised really good questions, like asking me about the backstory of the village and the motivation behind creating certain shapes, and also pointing out to me certain things about some of the designs that looked a little bit off, like if some of the designs looked a little bit too modern or didn't seem to fit the general grounded kind of medieval fantasy look. So it was really cool doing a stream like this, and I'm definitely going to do a lot more. While it is hard to design and talk and interact with the stream at the same time, I found it really fun to just bounce ideas around and hear feedback like in real time. And we just had a really cool discussion about the process and the ideas in general. It was really cool. So this process is a small part of a larger environment design. So it's important to not try to do too much at this stage. Right now, I'm just trying to come up with what the buildings might look like, and that's it. I'm not even trying to think about what the buildings are just yet. I might use that just as a jumping off point to start a sketch. Like, oh, now I'll draw a windmill or like a blacksmith or something. But I'll just use that as a jumping off point, because my main focus is literally just getting the look of the buildings in the environment. So the environment as a whole is going to involve the terrain and the geography, the layout of the buildings, how the roads work, the mood, the atmosphere, the people that live there, the function of the village. All this stuff is going to go into the overall environment design, and the look of the buildings is just a very small piece of that. So I'm not trying to ascribe a purpose to each building just yet. At later stages, once you get into more iterations and more specific buildings and their purpose, you can start exploring really fun world building stuff, like who lives there and how those characters and their lifestyles and personalities can affect the actual look and the details of where they live. So that will add a lot of character and uniqueness to the structures. And that's where you don't need to reinvent the wheel and create these amazing, unique, and really kind of fantastical architectural shapes. Often the strength in the design will just come through the storytelling and the character of the building, so to speak. Right now I'm just going through my sketches, and this is what I call like giving them all a chance. So some of them are better than others, and as I was going through, I started using different techniques, and some stuff started working and better than others. So now I'm just going back and trying to make sure they all have some kind of consistent quality before I move to the next stage. So here I just filled in a second value behind the dark shapes just to establish the silhouette. Then I just lowered the opacity of that group and created a new layer on top of everything, where I can start adding another layer of detail and fidelity to the designs. So I can start making certain things clear, like what certain materials are. If some areas are wooden, like wooden slats, what is like made of stone, what parts are grass, and I can start just indicating little things like that. Still keeping things loose, but making things a little bit more clear so that if I were to give this to a client or an art director, they would have a good idea of, at least a pretty good idea of the details and what things are. The first step is great for generating ideas and silhouettes, but there's just not quite enough detail to actually know what everything is. This is sort of like a semi-detail pass where I'm just resolving some shapes and deciding what they actually are. This is where having really good references comes in huge for your designs, where you can pick specific elements in references that you find really interesting and start incorporating them here with a little bit more precision. And I kind of do a little bit of a hybrid between line drawing and creating shadows. So I'm not afraid to fill in large areas with just solid black here. If there's something that's really occluded, or if there's a window or a large overhang or something that has a really pronounced cast shadow, I will just fill that in here. I'm not sticking to a strict line drawing. So I'd love to take the ideas from these sketches and continue fleshing them out, and then eventually create like a full key art illustration with characters and storytelling going on. And I think it'll be really cool for you guys to see the culmination of that, and how ideas from this very early stage in the first, hour of sketching make their way all the way to the end, and how these really early ideas influenced a bunch of decisions on the way to creating a finished key art. Being an artist and trying to find your individuality right now is hard. For me, it's just about trying to find peace in the process. With social media and the entertainment industry being what it is now, that can be really hard. I'm trying to eliminate as many of the little snags that I get stuck on and that stress me out as possible. I like to imagine being alone, away from the industry and social media, and imagine being in a place where money didn't exist and you're the only one who will ever see your art. In that made up place, what would you create, and what expectations would you have for yourself? What would bring you joy to create? How would you perceive your art without having all this other stuff to compare to, and the pressures of dozens of different people telling you which direction to go? Thinking this way helps me put things in perspective, and sometimes it can be hard to get to that place and really think that way and have it sink in. It's a struggle to have that perspective on a regular basis, especially when we have other responsibilities like work, and there are the realities of the industry. But that's the kind of thought process I try and have to find the closest possible thing to my most authentic expression in my art, and just making sure that I'm pursuing it for the right reasons, creating things that are as close to what I actually want to create as possible. So that's it for this video, guys. Thanks as always for watching. Please like the video if you liked it, and leave a comment if you want to see more stuff like this, or if you want me to go to the next steps of the process with something like this. And yeah, again, please go check out my Patreon, and if that's something of interest to you, please consider joining, because it's been really great and a lot of fun. So yeah, thank you guys as always for watching so much, and I'll see you in the next video.